After the finality of how I ended Part 9, you'd think to yourself, Part 10? You got out of prison, so what's left? I just want to say that up to this point, I've usually at least weathered the worst. I'm not a speedrunner. I'm not concerned with S ranking each fight. Whatever gets me through the fight has always ended up in the video, which makes me sad to say I basically cheated to get the footage for this video. I hate this boss. I hate whoever designed this boss. I hate the fact that this boss is the final boss. I hate the fact that this boss is a serious factor that could end up preventing this game from making it on the Patrician-tier list. It took me, from the first attempt to my first successful kill, around an hour and a half to beat the flame. And I hate the flame, but I soldiered through. At the 30-minute mark on the star, I was already ready to tap out. I gave up when I got to the 2-hour mark and realized that I was getting nowhere except exhausting space on my hard drive. It just amazes me. There are many pitfalls a designer can fall into when designing a boss. They might have too much health, they might do too much damage, they might be preceded by an unskippable cutscene you have to watch on every attempt. Someone at the Game Baker said, "Let's make the final boss difficult." Oh, but how do we do that? How about we have the boss push the player's mechanical skills to the edge? Well, we can't do that. We already signed off on the burst and the edge. I know. Let's make it really tedious to attempt the fight so when players give up, they'll think it's because of difficulty and not bad design. Well, that sounds like a terrible idea. Why don't we just have the boss use the movesets of every other boss in the game, like a big final exam? Kinda like Bernard. Bernard's a stupid joke. Besides, the writers and character artists are adamant about this design. Just give me something by tomorrow morning and we'll ship it. There is a difference between difficult and tedious. Tedious is a game where you are forced to retry again and again because of bad design. Difficult is a game where you are forced to retry again so you can become more skilled at a fair and consistent system. You might be able to tell that just by looking at this, the mechanics have been drastically altered for this fight. Well, aren't you observant? After the melee-only fight with the edge, I guess a ranged-only fight was inevitable, except instead of just keeping the old system, the game decides to change how the mechanics work. For one fight. Charging your shots no longer shoots one big shot, instead it fires off a massive beam, which is a huge trade-off. You can now shoot through waves and other shots to hit your targets, but you can't use charge shots to destroy certain shot types. As for your normal shots, don't bother using them. You need to use charge shots to hit the boss through these clusterfuck of phases. In addition, this is the only boss to fight entirely from a fixed position. This is also the only boss to eschew an arena in favor of a small fixed camera platform. This is also the only boss to use drones whilst fighting you. Are you starting to see the problem? Every boss in Furi has the potential to be vulnerable to what I call a middle phase spiking, where one of the middle phases will drastically spike in difficulty. Thus, you can master every phase up to that point and have to keep replaying those early phases in order to get to the harder parts. Furi does have a couple ways of preventing this from becoming a problem for the most part. Practice mode with the recent Invincible mode allows you to practice specific phases of specific fights. This is great because otherwise, to practice the star's 5th phase, I would have to sit through the most tedious and boring phases in the entire game. Phase 1 and 2. Phase 1 and 2 go hand in hand because they are identical. It's just reversing the roles of the drones. Stand in the middle of the platform and charge shot through all this shit, occasionally dodging beams and parrying attacks and shots. It only takes 2 minutes, but damn does it feel much longer than that to play. Phase 3. The boss will start spawning waves of death balls in fixed patterns. Once you survive around 5 of these waves, each hand and drone will start firing off a beam. Damage is inevitable here. Why? See these blue orbs? They're a bit hard to see on that blue floor, and even a bit harder to see when masked by giant blue beams. So more often than not, I would have to dodge into these orbs to get around a beam. Once one hand goes down, it's back to the waves of death balls, then more beams. You have the option of taking out the drones to reduce the number of beams, yes, but they respawn so quickly that it really doesn't make a difference. Phase 4. This is where things get bad, but it's still possible to learn. More death ball in patterns, and now the drones are contributing their own fat waves into the mix. These fat waves require both perfect positioning and perfect timing to successfully dodge, and failing to dodge one can result in double dipping where you get pinballed around by waves. Once the game is done torturing you with that, it's time to dodge waves and parry balls at the same time. A lot of situations happened with this where I would parry a ball and the game would force my character to stop long enough to hit the wave, or I would dodge the wave but it would leave me exposed long enough to get hit by the ball. Success in Phase 4 comes down to how well you dodge those fat waves from the first part and how much health you have left. Phase fuck you. I hate this phase. This is an endurance phase, meaning when you inevitably fail for the upteenth time, it's another 4 minutes of this tedious shit to get there. Which, by the way, includes 40 seconds of fucking cutscenes between phases. And it's so long. Part 1. Dodge these slow orbs for 40 seconds. You cannot damage the boss and there is no way to speed this part up. Every attempt is going to take 40 seconds. This is fine by itself, but you generally want to get through this by losing little, if no health, at possible. Part 2. The boss starts spitting tracking purple orbs at you. You can't destroy them because your charge shot no longer does that for this fight, and while you can parry them, they are timed just perfect enough so that the next one will hit you in your exposed period. Just dodge all of them, as well as the waves at the same time. Part 3. The boss now starts using giant beam attack you need to dodge while spawning destructible orbs that you need to clear a path through. This is actually perfectly doable. The only difficult part comes down to the fact that I almost always had less than 2 health, meaning that failing even once would result in death. Part 4. Yes, Part 4. No other boss has this many parts to a phase, even in their desperation phases. More destructible orbs you need to carve a path through, but this time with sections of indestructible orbs you have to go around. And later, fucking waves that you need to dodge through. And then finally, you can kill the boss. I haven't beaten the star on Furier because of Phase 5. I have Phase 1 through 3 down to pat and have even gotten alright at Phase 4, which surprised me. It's Phase 5 that really comes down to luck. I have beaten Phase 5. I've beaten it fairly. I went into practice mode, turned on invincible mode to lock the phase to Phase 5, and tried it 10 goddamn times in a row until I beat it. I was going to use a trainer to just fake a victory so I could get a score and call it a day, but I couldn't find one for the current version. I am perfectly willing to cheat to beat a game. I am even happy to feel satisfaction at having done so. I don't have the time and chiefly don't have the hard drive space to record myself doing another 50 attempts at this fight, just because of one phase. And with my luck, I'd probably manage to beat the boss when I wasn't recording. So fuck it. I probably saved myself over an hour in repeat attempts doing what I did. I feel no shame. The star is a terrible boss. The star is definitely a terrible final boss. It requires none of the skills you have learned up to this point, but an entirely new set of skills tailored just for this fight. So kudos to you guys that S-ranked the boss legitimately. Maybe I'll do it right one day, but I'm probably not going to touch Furi again for a long time after this video series is done. I'm frankly sick of it. It was an absolute blast playing through Furi the first time, and Furier difficulty made it a blast a second time again. But I didn't enjoy the star the first time, which I did beat, and I knew I wasn't going to enjoy the star the second time. So let's rank the bosses, best to worst. The Edge takes my top spot easily. I love that they laser focused on one aspect of the gameplay and did it really well. I also like the perspective shift. I felt his themes and character design worked really well and he was positioned perfectly in the boss order. The Burst takes my second spot, surprisingly to me. For a long time I'd have ranked her much lower, but with time I've come to appreciate how important she was in defining this game for me. Honestly, she could have been a better final boss of the game instead of the star. The Hand comes third. I really like the aesthetics of his character and level. He's also pretty fun to fight, but sadly, he's not a very challenging fight. I'm not sure what I would have changed to make him a more challenging opponent. Coming in fourth is the Beat. I don't really like her fight in particular, and her design isn't really relevant to her fight, but the way they told her story simply, by being such a weak fighter, was pretty great. The Chain comes fifth. This is definitely due to the facelift he got on Furier difficulty, turning him into a real boss. He's fun to fight and satisfying to beat. The Strap takes sixth. Although I like her fight, she has some core problems that's endemic of the lower end of the list, namely being overly reliant on the shifty dodge mechanics. The Scale takes the seventh spot. He's over-designed for the character he's supposed to be representing, he has annoying visual effects when he poisons you, he has way too many phases considering each one is literally just the last phase with more moves. The song is 8th. Deleting the saves of people who take her up on her offer was a bad decision, especially considering it can happen accidentally if you do decide to explore the levels. This can force people to struggle again on worse bosses like the line. The Flame comes in 9th. He felt more refined, which he should considering he was a post-release boss. I wanted to like him, but between lacking any character, having a stupid looking character design, and some pretty atrocious quirks, he ranks pretty low. The Line takes the 10th spot. I do like his visual design. He's an alright, even fun boss until that last phase, which brings us to our number 11 spot, the Star. None of her phases are fun. She is tedious to fight, her arena is annoying, her design is uninspired, and being the last boss, she sends the game off on the wrong note. All this time and I haven't even talked about why this fight is happening in the first place. Back in the valley, we discovered the only other landmark to find, a massive tower. In it, we ride an elevator up to this thing. It offers us a ride up into space, which we accept since leaving the planet is the only real reasonable thing we can do at this point. After a quick vista seeing the prison from the outside, we make it to our destination, a ship parked way out in space. As we drift towards the entrance, we spy a bunch of clones suspended in cryogenic stasis. Since they look like us and have short undercuts, I can assume we have been in this prison for a substantial period of time. We enter the ship, who is greeted by a massive AI, complete with a third eye, who calls us Ryder. We upload a report of the planet, but since we were only there roundabouts 5 minutes, not much can be gathered. We are then asked to approve the assimilation of the planet. Here's what happens if you do.
Confirm planet assimilation. Planet assimilation confirmed. Launching invasion protocol. Activating troops. Troops deployment in 3, 2, 1. Assimilation.
Then it spits you out onto the menu and asks you to watch the cutscene again, as though telling you to do it again, but this time do it right. What's the point of giving the player agency to make a choice if you're just going to reject it? So we obviously decline, and that unfortunately means we engage in one terrible boss fight. Once the star is down by some lucky miracle, the ship explodes, we are shown that vista with the voice again, grinning ear to ear about our decision, and the stranger flies off into space. So, is Furi an all-meat kind of story? Does it truly lack a decent story, or does it merely withhold it in the beginning? The story of Furi reminded me of two Greek myths, the story of the Minotaur and the story of Icarus. The common element amongst these two stories is Daedalus. Daedalus was the architect of the labyrinth, an inescapable maze which housed the Minotaur, which may or may not have existed because Daedalus helped Pasiphae, its mother, procreate with its father, a bull. In the story of the Minotaur, Theseus arrives to slay the Minotaur and end King Minos' practice of taking 14 Athenians to sacrifice to the Minotaur. Obvious parallel times, but the Minotaur in this case would obviously be the original stranger and Daedalus would be the voice, who was the architect of the prison. In the story of Icarus, after the Minotaur was slain, Daedalus and his son Icarus were thrown in the labyrinth. Alright, it was actually a giant tower, but I prefer the version where they could only escape the labyrinth by flying out. Anyways, you know how Icarus' story ends. It's harder to draw parallels in this story, it's only really relevant because Daedalus has to escape his own prison. Hey, Editor Patrician here. Writer Patricia wasn't smart enough to realize the tower in the story of Icarus is this tower in Furi. Icarus in this case would be the reformed stranger, and it ends with the stranger flying too close to the star. Get it? I looked it up, and sure enough, the game bakers have stated that Furi's initial inspiration was an inverse of the story of Theseus. I just want to say I drew that connection independently, although I likened it more to lifting elements of the original mythology rather than making a direct inverse parallel to it. The story goes like this. The star sent the stranger down to survey the planet and its defenses. The planet was wise to this due to the line's foresight, and they were able to capture the stranger before he could return to the mothership. The star probably didn't send any follow-up soldiers down for the same reason that the voice's daughter didn't age while her father was inside the prison, due to some kind of time dilation technology. The planet assembles its best warriors inside the prison for arguably one of two reasons. As far as I can see, The first would be to try and devise some way of killing him. If time is, at a minimum, slowed down, then they aren't really delaying the stranger, and they would be limited to the resources inside the prison. The second theory would be to try and indoctrinate the stranger into sparing the planet. It's not really clear either way. This is due to the anemic way the story is told. It doesn't want to lay hours of exposition on you to try to explain the finer details of what's happening, which is good, but it leaves many of those details up to speculation, which is bad. I refuse to write any story for the writer, so in this case, who knows? The voice inevitably releases the stranger to start killing the guardians and escape the prison so he can be with his daughter again, if even only for a minute. Then it's left in the player's hand how they decide to deal with the planet. The canonical choice is rather obvious, since the game just resets you if you choose to wipe the planet out. It's definitely light on the story by the modern standard of having everything explained to us in horrifying detail. The stranger is, probably, some clone, and definitely has advanced features like a heart rate of 8 beats per minute and a speed of 73 kilometers per hour, or 45 miles per hour. As far as the Guardians go, they are half what the voice says they are and half what they act like, which means the Flame and the Star, with no comments from the voice, are very lacking in detail. The stranger and the star might come from another world, which is dependent on military conquest to sustain itself. Maybe. I don't know. I like the story. I like the way the characterization is handled by the way the characters act in-game rather than how we are told they are to be characterized. You can tell the Edge is obsessed with the stranger between his mimicking many facets of the stranger's style, both visually and how they fight, but that he still has his own individual stylings, and he's just one example, albeit one of the better ones. The end. Go watch the finale.